One of the most common things that you will do in Fusion, especially when you're doing compositing and visual effects, is tracking footage. But with 4 different trackers to choose from in the Fusion page, how do you know which one to choose? Well, that's what we're talking about today. So let's get started. Now, before we dive into Davinci Resolve, just a quick word of warning. This is not going to be a comprehensive, super detailed tutorial on every single tracker in Davinci Resolve's Fusion page. We're gonna go over the 4 trackers that it includes. We're going to talk about the best use cases for each one, and I'm gonna do a quick run through of how to use each tracker. But if you want to learn more, I will create more detailed tutorials. Just, let me know in the comments which one you want to learn more about. All right, let's get into Davinci Resolve. Okay, so we're here in the edit page in Davinci Resolve. I've got some clips lined up, ready to go. These are all clips that I got from Artlist, which is where I get all of my music and sound effects and stock footage. They'll be linked below if you want to check them out. But we're going to use each one of these pieces of footage for a different tracker. And so let's go ahead and select our first piece of footage, head to the Fusion page. Now, the first tracker we're going to take a look at is the point tracker, which, just like it sounds like, is going to allow us to take an element, another element. In this case, it's going to be a little melted smiley face, and we're going to have it follow along with a specific point in our footage. So let's select media in 1. We'll hit Shift Space on our keyboard. We'll search for tracker, and we'll find our tracker right here, TRA. We're gonna select that, hit add, and that's gonna add our tracker to our pipeline. And when that happens, we'll also find a little tracking point in our preview monitor. Now, if we wanted to, we could add additional tracking points like so. And this will open you up to some more options like stabilizing your footage, allowing you to track translation, rotation, scale, all that kind of thing. But we're not going to use it for that. And so we'll just delete this tracking point and this tracking point. And what we're going to do is just grab our tracking point and find something to track. In this case, it's going to be the edge of our stick because it's a nice high contrast point in our footage. So now we've got our tracking point. All we got to do is hit track forward, and you'll see that our little box is following along with the edge of our stick. And when that's all said and done, we'll get a little dialog box. It says render completed. We'll hit OK, and we'll find a whole bunch of keyframes in our timeline saying, hey, look, our footage was tracked correctly. Yay. So let's go back to the beginning of our timeline. Now from here, what we can do is we can take our little melted smiley face from our media pool, place it into our node graph. And the cool thing about this tracker is it also acts as sort of a merge node. So we can grab our media in 2 and connect it to the foreground input of our tracker, and nothing happens. There's nothing in our preview monitor, no melted smiley face. Let's fix that. We're gonna select our tracker, and now's the point where we tell our tracker what to do. Let's head to our operation tab, and we're going to change our operation from none to match move and keep our merge as foreground over background. That is telling Davinci Resolve, hey, make sure that our smiley face is following along with our tracking point. But before we see what that looks like, our smiley face is way too big. So let's grab our media in 2. We're going to add a transform node, and we will just grab our transform node here, and we're gonna reposition and resize our little smiley face. And if we play that back, you'll see that our smiley face is moving along with the end of the stick. It's pretty cool. All right, let's head to our next clip. We've got some really cool little pyramids here. It's a little zoom out shot, and we're going to use the planar tracker on this one. The planar tracker is really good for having added elements move along with the footage. So let's give ourselves a little bit more room to work with here. And to use the planar tracker, just like the point tracker, we're gonna select media in, and we're going to hit Shift Space, and we're gonna look for Planar Tracker. Here's Planar Tracker right here. We're gonna select that. We're gonna hit Add, and there we go. And now all we have to do is we're gonna draw, let's bring our footage back to the beginning, and we're just going to draw a little box over the area that we want to track. There we go. And from there, we can head into our inspector, and we can kind of change some parameters for our tracker a little bit. First of all, we've got a choice between point and hybrid point area. Point is literally going to just track the points, and hybrid point area is going to not only track the points, but also track the area as a whole and take into account the difference in perspective and scale and all of that. Hybrid point area is basically what I always use. Motion type, this is going to kind of tell Davinci Resolve, hey, when you add in this new element, are we going to be changing just the translation, meaning the location of it on the screen? Are we going to be changing the translation and the rotation, rotation and scale, the perspective? And for this, we're probably just going to need translation, rotation, and scale. That's the most people are going to need, honestly. The output is going to be background, track channel, Luma. And then from there, what we can do is just hit track to end. And you'll see it's creating all these little tracking points within our little tracking area. This little tracking area, by the way, is called a plane. Hence Planar Tracker. And once again, when that's all said and done, we'll have a whole bunch of keyframes saying, hey, we're done tracking, yay. Now, unlike the point tracker, we can't just plug in our little smiley face to the Planar Tracker. What we need to do is actually select our planar tracker and come over here, and we're going to hit create planar transform. And when we do that, we'll get a little planar transform node, and this is going to have all of the tracking data from our planar tracker. So we can actually delete our planar tracker now, and we can bring our media into our planar transform, and we can merge our planar transform over media in one. And now we've got our smiley face, but again, it's way too big. So let's go ahead and select our media in two. We'll hit transform to add a transform node. And once again, we will resize and reposition, maybe place it right there. Now, sometimes what we get, if we resize something, it can get a little bit jumpy with the planar transform. So even though you have a good track, you'll end up having your foreground elements jumping around a little bit. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is select our transform node, and we are going to hit shift space on our keyboard, and we're going to add a crop node. And what that is going to do is it's going to make sure that everything going into this planar transform is the same resolution as our background footage. And now, if we come back to the beginning and we play that back, you'll see that our little smiley face guy is zooming out with the pyramids, with the camera. It's all moving together. It's all nice and pretty. That's pretty cool. All right, let's take a look at our next clip. This one's gonna be super fun. Now we're gonna take a look at the surface tracker. The surface tracker is really good at tracking fluid surfaces, things like skin, or in this case, a t-shirt. It acts a lot like the mesh tracker in Mocha Pro. So here's what we're gonna do. We're going to add our media in one, or we're going to select our media in one. We're going to hit shift space. We're going to look for surface. We're going to find our surface tracker, select that and hit add. And we've got our surface tracker in our pipeline. Now there's a few tabs in the inspector for the surface tracker, and we're going to take a look at all of them. The first is bounds. This is where we tell the surface tracker what part of our surface we want to track. So let's go ahead. We're going to put our smiley face on this t-shirt. So let's go ahead and track our t-shirt. We're going to add some bounds here, just like that. And we can add different boundaries. We can add holes to our bounds, but we're not going to get into that today. This is just a bare bones tutorial. Let's go ahead and head over to mesh. And this is where we can define what our mesh looks like. We can add points to our mesh. So if we scale this up, we'll end up getting some more mesh points. That is, we can bring down our minimum point spacing, which is going to add even more. That's pretty good right there. And then from there, we can just go to track, and we'll hit track forwards. And with this tracker, you not only see your little progress bar, but you can actually see it creating the keyframes as it goes. All right, and there we go. We've got our track right there. It's all done. Now what we need to do is head to our result tab, and nothing's happened here because we still don't have our smiley face. So let's grab our smiley face, and we can plug that into our surface tracker. And to make this look like it's a little bit more of a natural part of the t-shirt, we can come in. The cool thing about the surface tracker, we grab that surface tracker and we come down to overlay placement. We can change the reference frame. We can change our composite. So if we come down to compositing, we'll change this to, let's say, overlay. Now it looks like it's a little bit more natural. We can bring down the opacity a little bit. There we go. And if we come back to the beginning and we play that back, you can see that our smiley face is kind of warping with the shirt a little bit. It's moving along with the shirt. It looks like it's a natural part of the shirt. It's pretty cool. All right, let's move on to our final clip. This is where we're going to take a look at the camera tracker. Now, the camera tracker is really cool. This is for 3D scenes. This will turn your 2D image into a 3D scene. It will allow you to add other elements into that 3D scene. So if maybe you have something off camera that you want to have come in camera later, you can do that. It's a super, super cool thing. So I'm just going to do a real quick rundown of the camera tracker. What we're going to do is we're going to select media in, we're going to hit shift space, we'll type in camera, and we're going to go to camera tracker and hit add. Now there are a whole bunch of settings in the inspector for the camera tracker, and I'm not going to go through them all, but you can basically use these settings here to add more or less tracking points. I'm going to leave it at its default settings, mostly because I tested this out before and it actually gives me a pretty good track. So let's just go ahead and hit auto track, and it's going to auto track our footage. And you'll see while it's tracking, we've got all of these little blue dots here helping us track the footage. These are all the different points that it's tracking. And once that's done tracking, we can come, there's a bunch of different stuff we can do. We could go into the camera tab and we can actually tell Davinci Resolve what camera was used to film this, what focal length was used, the aperture width and height and all of that stuff. And that would help you get a better solve. We're not going to do that here. What we're going to do is move on to the solve tab, and we're going to click solve. Now what we're looking for is a solve error less than 1. And let's wait for that to solve. And we've got an error of 0.4563. That's less than 1, so we're going to run with it. If this was over 1, what we could do is come down to track filtering, and we could change these settings around to get rid of some of the tracks that weren't working, but this works. So we're going to move on to export, and we're going to come down to ground plane options and 3D scene transform. We're going to open both of those up. We're going to select show in view on ground plane so we can see where our ground plane is. But in order to see it, we're gonna actually have to add a 3D merge to our camera tracker and a 3D camera to our 3D merge. Now we'll select our camera tracker again, and this is where we can tell Davinci Resolve where our ground plane is, what our origin point is. So let's go ahead and hit unaligned so we can set that. And we're going to set our ground plane right around here. We'll hit set from selection, and then we're going to set our origin point as right here, set from selection. And then what we can do is come up to export, click that, and you'll see we've got a whole new group of nodes here, and this is all of our tracking data in a whole bunch of different nodes. And what we can do from there is actually delete our camera tracker, this camera 3D, and this merge, break this connection right here, and we'll have our media in 1 going into our camera 3D 2 and our camera tracker renderer into media out 1. You'll see we've got our ground plane right here, so that definitely worked. We don't really need our ground plane though, so let's go ahead and turn that off so we don't have to look at it. And from here, we can go ahead and we can add our smiley face. All right, so we've added our little smiley face here. We've added a little drop shadow, which is pretty cool. And now if we play this back, you'll see that our little 3D element is just kind of staying in the same spot, and it moves out of frame as the camera moves. Now, again, these are just the best use cases for these trackers. If you actually dive into the settings, you can unlock a whole bunch of other cool stuff that you can do. If you want some more detailed tutorials on these trackers, let me know in the comments. I actually already created one on the surface tracker, though. You can check that out right here. And until next time, don't forget to go out and make stuff. Thanks for watching.